First Garden, The White House Garden and How It Grew, written and illustrated by Robin Gourley, foreword by Alice Waters. A vegetable garden on the White House grounds. What a beautiful symbol for America. Its creation at our country's most visible address is a joyful return to the values of Thomas Jefferson. It is a victory garden in the truest sense, a demonstration to the world that as Americans we are dedicated to the stewardship of the land and the nourishment of our citizens. Growing delicious seasonal fruits and vegetables on the White House lawn does so much more than just feed our first family. The garden teaches us about the beauties of nature and the bounty that comes from the earth. It shows that local, affordable, healthful food should be a right for all people, not just the privilege of a few. And it energizes and inspires the nation, creating a lasting vision for generations to come. Alice Waters. Alice Waters is the founder and owner of Chez Panisse Restaurant and Cafe in Berkeley, California. She is also the founder of the Edible Schoolyard program, which creates organic garden and kitchen classrooms in urban public schools. Gardens are tended and harvested by students, and hands-on ecology and nutrition lessons are woven into the curriculum. The White House is the official home of the President of the United States of America. The first president, George Washington, supervised its construction beginning in 1792, but he never lived there. In fact, work still wasn't finished when the second president, John Adams, and his wife, Abigail, moved in 8 years later. Since then, each new president has made changes and additions to the furnishings, the building, and the grounds. The White House now has 132 rooms, counting the offices in 2 wings. There are 35 bathrooms, 11 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, 3 dining rooms, 1 library, 1 bowling alley, and a movie theater. The White House sits on 18 acres of land called the President's Park in the heart of Washington, D.C. The park includes the Rose Garden, where the president sometimes gives speeches, the Jacqueline Kennedy Garden, where the president often entertains informally, and the Children's Garden, which has a goldfish pond and an apple tree that's perfect for climbing. There's also a swimming pool, a basketball court, a tennis court, a landing pad for the president's helicopter, and a huge open area called the South Lawn, home to the annual Easter egg roll. Over the years, more than 50 children have lived in the White House, and the South Lawn has been their backyard and playground. Tad Lincoln, son of Abraham Lincoln, kept 2 ponies in the White House stables. Benjamin McKee, grandson of Benjamin Harrison, drove a cart pulled by a goat named Old Whiskers. Kermit Roosevelt, son of Theodore Roosevelt, played fetch with his terrier Jack, one of 5 family dogs. John Kennedy Jr., son of John F. Kennedy, liked to splash in the White House fountain. Tricia Nixon, daughter of Richard Nixon, was married in the Rose Garden. Amy Carter, daughter of Jimmy Carter, had slumber parties in her treehouse on the South Lawn. When Barack Obama became the 44th president, he moved into the White House with his wife, First Lady Michelle Obama, their daughters Malia and Sasha, and Mrs. Obama's mother, Marian Robinson. Soon they added a dog named Bo to the family. As First Lady and as a mom, Mrs. Obama was concerned about the health of the American people. She believed we should think about what we eat and where our food comes from. And she wanted her family, all families, to become healthier by eating more vegetables and fruits and by eating meals together at the table. One day early in 2009, Mrs. Obama watched Malia and Sasha play on the south lawn. She gazed out at the large expanse of grass where President Taft's cow Pauline once grazed and where President Wilson once kept a flock of sheep. And she made a decision. She would plant a kitchen garden full of fruits and vegetables right there on the White House lawn. The president thought it was a wonderful idea. Other first families have had vegetable gardens at the White House, but there hadn't been one since Eleanor Roosevelt's Victory Garden. It was planned in 1943 during World War II to show Americans the importance of growing extra food and conserving fuel to support the war effort. But after the war ended and food was more readily available at grocery stores, most Americans lost interest in backyard gardening. Mrs. Obama began planning for the kitchen garden right away. She would need lots of help, but she knew of some very good workers. Before we learn about the workers that Mrs. Obama knew to help with her vegetable garden, I'm going to read to you the timeline of gardens at the White House that is shown on this page. 1800, President John Adams planned the first White House garden so that first families could enjoy fresh fruits and vegetables. 1801, Thomas Jefferson added ornamental trees and fruit trees to the grounds. He also grazed cattle on the south lawn. 1825, John Quincy Adams described the garden during his term of office as 2 acres covered with forest and fruit trees, shrubs, hedges, vegetables, kitchen and medicinal herbs, hothouse plants, flowers, and weeds. 1835, Andrew Jackson built the White House Orangery, a greenhouse for year-round tropical fruit to be grown. 1918, President Woodrow Wilson and his wife Edith grazed sheep on the lawn as an edible landscape that trimmed the grass and provided wool and mutton, which is just another word for lamb that you eat. 1943, Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, planted a victory garden on the lawn and encouraged citizens to plant their own gardens. It's estimated that by the end of World War II, 20 million homeowners had victory gardens and produced close to 40% of the fresh vegetables eaten in America. That's almost half the vegetables that everybody in America eats. They were growing in their backyard back in 1943. In 1973, First Lady Patricia Nixon organized spring and fall tours of the White House grounds to share the beauty of the gardens with the American public. Back to the story where Mrs. Obama knew about the helpers that would help with her vegetable garden. In March, on the first day of spring, Mrs. Obama invited 23 fifth-grade boys and girls from Bancroft Elementary School in Washington, D.C., to come and help her begin work on the garden. White House gardeners had marked off an 1,100-square-foot space on the lawn. Mrs. Obama showed the children how to dig up the grass and break up the earth beneath it. With the assistance of the White House kitchen staff, they turned the soil with shovels and spades and hands. The gardeners added organic material to help the vegetables grow and keep insects away. And beekeeper Charlie Brantz installed a beehive nearby, a home for about 60,000 bees that would pollinate plants and make honey for the White House. Seedlings were started in the White House greenhouse. Some were from seeds passed down by plants first grown 200 years ago by Thomas Jefferson. They came from his garden in Monticello, Virginia, and were donated by the Thomas Jefferson Foundation. In April, the children from Bancroft Elementary came back to help plant the kitchen garden. Mrs. Obama showed them how to dig a shallow hole in the soft, warm earth, plant a seedling in it, and mound and tap the soil around it for support. On hands and knees they worked, carefully placing young shoots of Thomas Jefferson lettuces, cabbages, and spinach. They planted parsley and thyme, eggplant and cucumber, carrots, kale, and sweet potatoes, raspberries, and blueberries. In all, they planted 55 varieties of herbs, fruits, and vegetables. The president said, "No beets." So it was a no-beet garden. When they finished sowing the shoots from the seedlings, the children gave the garden a deep, gentle watering. At the end of their first day of work, laid out in neat rows, ready to grow, bursting with promise, was the first garden. In every garden, there is ongoing work, and there are problems to deal with. There are weeds. Mrs. Obama said, "Everyone will have to weed, even the president." There are plant-destroying bugs. In the first garden, ladybugs and praying mantises were introduced to control harmful insect populations. And nasturtiums, zinnias, and marigolds, flowers that naturally keep bugs away, were planted. There are animal pests. In the first garden, some of the plants are covered with fine netting to keep birds, squirrels, and rabbits away. In the first garden, there are a few unusual problems to deal with as well. The wind created by the president's helicopter could knock over the beehive, so it had to be fastened securely to its stand, and the stand set in concrete. The garden is very popular, and there are many people who want to see it. To protect it from being trampled and sampled, visitors are taken around by guides. Bo had to be kept out of the garden because dogs like to dig. Mrs. Obama enlisted Christetta Comerford, the White House executive chef, and Bill Yassas, the dessert chef, to begin planning vegetable and fruit dishes for the first family and for guests of the White House. Sam Cass, an assistant chef, was appointed Food Initiative Coordinator to oversee the garden. It took just 6 weeks for the first garden to start producing food ready for harvest. In June, Christetta served a salad course made of ingredients from the garden to 20 important guests of the president. By July, Bill was making desserts with rhubarb and honey. As the garden grew, it could provide vegetable courses and salads for as many as 140 White House guests, or appetizers for as many as 1,000. It helped feed the first family and the staff, and it provided food to Miriam's Kitchen, an organization that prepares and serves free, healthy, homemade meals to homeless men and women in Washington, D.C. To celebrate the success of the kitchen garden, Mrs. Obama planned a harvest party for August. The invitation list included the student gardeners from Bancroft Elementary and Sam, Christetta, Bill, and Charlie. After being away from the garden for 4 months, the children were surprised at how much everything had grown and how much was ready to be eaten. Mrs. Obama showed them how to cut the lettuces at ground level. They picked peas and berries. Then they all trooped into the White House kitchen where Christetta had them wash the lettuce, pick over the peas to get the good ones, and throw out the tiny rocks that can cling to vegetables fresh from the garden. With Christetta and Sam, they prepared a salad and decorated cupcakes with raspberries and blueberries. Then they all sat down at picnic tables on the south lawn to enjoy their feast. Over the summer, the first garden produced more than 1,000 pounds of food, and the bees produced 134 pounds of honey, roughly 11 gallons. In September, Mrs. Obama hosted a dinner for the spouses of international leaders. It was a very elegant affair, and each guest was given a one-of-a-kind china tea set and a hand-blown glass container full of White House honey. The first garden was now famous around the world. Winters in Washington, D.C. are usually fairly mild, so gardening can go on year-round. In December, Sam oversaw the installation of a hoop house, a set of metal bars placed over the garden beds and covered with tight-fitting fabric. The sun warms the hoop house during the day, and the fabric traps the heat, so the plants don't freeze overnight. This means the first family and guests of the White House can enjoy fresh spinach, lettuce, carrots, mustard greens, chard, and cabbage until it's time to prepare the soil and plant new seeds in the spring. It doesn't take a south lawn to make a kitchen garden. It takes a windowsill and a pot, a small part of your own backyard, or a plot in a community garden. You can follow the same steps taken by the White House. Prepare the soil, plant your seeds or shoots, keep out weeds and pests, harvest, and save the seeds for next year's garden. And whether or not you have a garden, you can make small changes for better nutrition and health. You can eat like the president's family. Buy more local produce, add more fruits and vegetables to every meal, eat fewer processed and sugary foods, eat out less often, and sit down as a family for meals. More than 200 years ago, while building a new nation on principles of independence and self-reliance, our country's founders planted gardens to bring nourishment to their families and beauty to their surroundings. They understood that the more you garden, the more you grow. The White House kitchen garden marks a glorious return to those early ideas. And who knows, if beets are planted there, the president may even grow to like them. Good reasons to garden. Gardens produce delicious food that nourishes our bodies and keeps us healthy. Gardens conserve energy and resources by cutting back on our need for packaged, transported, and warehoused foods. Gardening doesn't require a lot of fancy, expensive tools. Produce from the garden costs less than store-bought produce. Gardening is great exercise. It takes plenty of lifting, bending, and stretching to plant, weed, and harvest a garden. Tending a garden is a good way to relieve stress. It can help create a happy mind and a peaceful spirit. Extra food and flowers from the garden make great gifts for friends and neighbors. Home gardening can help us appreciate the work of those who farm for a living. Compost made from kitchen scraps, leaves, and yard clippings can be added to garden soil. It's a way to help plants grow while recycling and reducing waste. Gardens create beautiful landscapes for people to enjoy. Gardens attract birds, bees, and butterflies. Trees and shrubs offer shade and shelter for wildlife. Gardening is an activity that can be shared by people of all ages, from little kids to grandparents. It can be shared by neighborhoods, communities, and towns. Gardeners are stewards and protectors of the land. The last few pages of this book are just recipes from the White House that they used produce from their garden to create. So if you get this book out from the library, you could test out some of these recipes at your house too.